Hey everybody, welcome to this thing we do. Again, we are doing 10 Ton Hammer Talks. We're on episode 10 now. We have made it far. I feel like the double digits are a milestone. So,
Absolutely.
another good show. I'm joined by Jeremy, as always, and we've got some interesting topics to talk about today. We're going to be talking about, kind of a lot of games, a lot of games, and we're actually gonna get to you're gonna get to hear some opinions, believe it or not, opinions on games of those.
So basically, like nothing you've ever heard us do before. Games and opinions. We're breaking new ground today.
Yes, and we may or may not even talk about some games that we want to fail or want to succeed. So there's a little teaser out there. But I'll go ahead and let Jeremy do our spiel, and I'll get us set up here.
I think that's the right way to put it. All right. So yeah, again, thanks everyone for watching. For those of you who don't know or haven't heard me do this little thing every week, we do work for 10 Ton Hammer. And it is because of them that we get to do a lot of the cool stuff we do. We get to be employed, talking about video games in various fashions. So it is super important for us that you do support 10 Ton Hammer. Go to 10tonhammer.com. Just interact with us on the site. We do have the forums that are up. For those that do feel so inclined to support the site in any sort of financial capacity, we do have our Patreon page, which is linked. But even if you don't, just going on the site, interacting with our content is super helpful. We have a lot of good writers there, do all sorts of different content for a lot of different games and genres. So anything that you might be interested in, chances are you're going to be able to find something that will tickle your fancy. So please check out 10tonhammer.com. It helps us, it helps our employers, and it keeps us employed, which is really our goal here. So yes, please do that.
Yes, and I've returned back to
Yes.
full-time duty, so you will see more things from me there. I think I've kind of stormed it already this week, so there should be several new things up for me. But yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So really the main topic today I had is kind of this, we've seen over the last few years kind of a big boom in the gaming industry, and there's a lot of things that it could be tied to, the progression of technology, having computers in our hands with smartphones. But whatever it's been, gaming in general has become more acceptable. The term gamer, you're not necessarily the outcast group anymore. Everybody games, it seems like, these days. So kind of a big thing, and what has that led to? More people coming into gaming has led to more money in the industry, and therefore more games being produced. So what we're seeing over the last few years is like this massive flood of games, and there are other things tying in indie, the indie boom, kind of people getting their hands on more refined, easily accessible tools to make games. So all these things I think are factors that tie into why there are so many games. So basically that's kind of what we're going to open it up with is the flooded market. We're going to talk about some genres, and I'm going to, I guess, pose first to Jeremy. What you being a kind of like an expert in the MOBA genre, can you what are the top games that obviously people are going to know the top games, but say some top games, say some obscure games, kind of talk about kind of how many different games are out there. Maybe some people don't know about some that you might know about.
Okay, so obviously, first and foremost, you can't talk about MOBAs without talking about Dota, since that was pretty much, the grandpappy of them all. And some will argue, the best or most intense or whatever. Certainly the most popular has been League of Legends for a variety of reasons. Not going to get into, too much on that, but basically League took a very successful formula made by Dota, but then I think made it slightly more accessible. Which is kind of, incredibly important when you're trying to build up an audience. So I think, that had a lot to do with it when the genre was still very much open, because there weren't a ton of them yet. Riot Games, saw an opportunity. They took the formula that was created by Dota, they refined it, they changed it a bit, and so just kind of opened it up to be accessible to a wider audience, made it very successful. Past that, Heroes of the Storm has been seeing success largely just by nature of being a Blizzard game. again, it kind of works off that accessibility factor where it actually strips away a lot of the smaller things in MOBAs to try to appeal to a wider audience so that, people who don't want to sit down for a 40 to 45-minute game each time, they have the option of playing a MOBA for 15, 20 minutes, so it opened it up for people who found the previous MOBA formula a bit tedious and gave them an option as well. Then you have other games like Smite, which I think is cool because they did something different. It's a different camera, not just camera angle, but a different play style. So again, you have the general idea of the MOBA there, but it is a pretty different play style, and it works off of mythology, which for me I always find very cool. So I really enjoy that they did that. And again, if you're watching someone play Smite, if you know anything about any of the games, you're not gonna mistake it for a different game. It definitely has its very own unique style, which is very cool. And then you have your different ones that have failed, and I'm gonna get the name wrong because I have a name in my mind that I think it's wrong, and I'm actually gonna Google it real quick to see if I'm right or wrong about this. Because there was a MOBA that was going to be coming out. I think I am right. So I was thinking Dawngate. I think that actually is what it is. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it was Dawngate. Hey, I was right. So it was run by EA, which I guess is probably all I need to say for as far as some people are concerned. But there was a lot of excitement around that game, and it was supposed to be really good, and it was looking to do some pretty innovative things, and I was actually interested to see where it went, and then it failed. So there's always that, and again, I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to point to EA and say, well, yeah, of course it failed, but it's it's interesting because there's so many things behind the scene where a game can have a major company behind it, even not just being an indie game, but have a major company behind it, have a lot of cool things that you're looking at, have a lot of work put into it, and then still not even ever actually make it out to the public. So yeah, so I don't know if that exactly answers what you're looking for, but yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I obviously haven't mentioned every MOBA ever. There's other things like Heroes of the New Earth and whatnot, which I'm not as familiar with, but there's definitely a lot out there, and there's a lot that goes into whether a game has any sort of success or not.
Yeah, well, just to name a few, basically, I'm not gonna really hit them all, but obviously Defensive Agents since like 2003, and then you're looking at Minions, Demigod, League of Legends hitting in the late right before 2010, and then we've got all these ones that sprung up after League of Legends, Heroes of New Earth, Realm of the Titans, Bloodline Champions, Guardians of Middle Earth IP version on the MOBA. There's plenty, and that's just I'm already skipping past 10, 12 games, and you're looking into 2014, 2015. I'm looking on Wikipedia, by the way. Expert reviews there. But I mean, there's like 30, probably like 30 games. Well, not quite 30, but like 25 games listed. And these are games that are kind of built on the idea of being a competitive game where a lot of it is skill based, or at least strategy based, and taking time to learn the strategies and develop cooperative teamwork. So these aren't games that you can really play multiples of, and it's kind of the thing, is there that many players out there playing MOBAs to fill these kind of games? So it's one of the one of the places where you see a bit of a crowded market, and everybody kind of knows the big games, the most refined or maybe the most accessible, I guess. Jeremy made a great point about that, about a few games being really accessible. And I think, that's one thing that you're seeing. And on the flip side of that, we'll flip this over to MMORPGs now. This is something that we've seen since, the mid-2000s, really, is kind of the 2010-11 swarm of MOBAs that started, going into development, is kind of what you saw with MMORPGs, basically after Ultima Online, EverQuest, and those games started putting out expansions, and they saw people paying the subscriptions for years, and they're like, this is going to make money. So you start getting this flood, and I'm not even going to begin to start going over the list of MMOs, because 5 years, 10 years ahead of MOBAs, there's so many that you can't even begin. But
You just spend the rest of the episode on you just listing off names of games.
Yeah, it literally would probably take that long. It would probably take 10 minutes to just read them, speed read them all. But anyways, the point I'm making is, just in these two genres alone, you can see so many games out there, and these are two genres that are really time intensive. They're not games, I mean, you can play them casually, of course, but they're not games that most people play casually, I would say. I think a lot of people try to play competitively or try to achieve things in MMOs, even though, they might play casually often. There's a lot of people that have intents to play competitively, even if they don't actually ever get there. So my whole point is, these are just two genres. We won't even discuss the mobile games genre, which is, how many Candy Crushes and the Facebook games, all those. It's just crowded. There's so many games out there. And I guess the real thing is, like, when you're looking at a game a game market that's so crowded, you're seeing the money pouring into it, but how many of these projects are sustainable, and how, there's, at some point, it's all economics. At some point, you're going to see a bit of a backlash, and you're going to see a dropout of games or a fallout, which I think we're, beginning to see in MMORPGs. You're starting to get that fallout where people are just getting bored of them. They're playing a game for a few months, doing what they want, or maybe seeing as much of it that they want, and then they're just out, and that game becomes unsustainable. They move it to free to play to, kind of keep the heart beating a little longer, but I don't think we've seen a ton of free to play games, MMORPGs that have switched to free to play and continue to persist well. Obviously the big giants continue to strive, but other games, they're just ticking away. You see the servers crunching in together and merging, and it's almost like some new games. I mean, WildStar has, I believe, just a few servers that they're running now. I believe they expanded with a couple, so they have 4, 2 PvE and 2 PvP. So, and that's a pretty new game. That's not that old, I don't think.
Right.
So
no, that's relatively new.
Yeah, so it's just this thing that I think is, I think that everybody actually is kind of feeling this, starting to fallout of it. And I think, it'll happen with MOBAs at some point too, if not already, who knows. It just depends on, the factor of how many people are playing, how many people are paying, because everything's kind of also moving free to play. So,
well, I think you made a good point in that, especially with MOBAs, that it's hard to take a game like that and play, 3 or 4 of them with any sort of consistency. So the popular ones will likely remain popular because of the time investment that their players have put into them already. It's hard to just walk away from that, if you've been playing for a long time, because you feel like you have invested something. And for most of us, who play MMO, we probably have quite literally invested at least some amount of money into the accounts and a lot of time and effort. And it's hard to just walk away from that, which I think makes it harder for a new MOBA to have success, because it has to it has to either be able to bring in new players who haven't played MOBAs yet, and or has to be able to take players away from existing MOBAs. And it's hard because players who are going to play a game in that genre likely already are, and that's not to say that there can't be any new players. There's always, new players getting introduced by their friends or whatnot. But it's hard to you can't get a huge player base from all new players, because that's hard, especially in a genre like this. And then you have to offer something about, hey, why don't you come play our game instead of one of the most popular video games in the world? It can be very hard to do that as well. So I think specifically with that genre, it's particularly challenging, and I think some developers are kind of starting to get that. And I don't know if that's what happened with Dawn Gate or if it was something else, but I think it's starting to become apparent that the big ones are staying big. You look at, for example, Dota's The International, and the amount of money that the player base is willing to put in, to pump up the prize pool, gets to just, absolutely insane levels, which is awesome to see. You look at the player base and the viewer base of League of Legends, and it's still, astronomical, which is, again, fantastic. You look, even, a game like Smite might not be as big, but at least, their world championships are pretty big, got big prize pools, still have a lot going on for them. But then, some of the smaller ones, it's, they might have a player base, but they're, I don't know if I'm going to say never, but it would certainly be a struggle to try to get anywhere near the level of the top games in the genre.
Yeah, I think you made a great point about, the way these games, have to offer something and be different. They have to innovate a little bit to try and catch some of this audience that's already, because it feels almost like it's maxed out. I mean, I'm sure the genre and the gaming industry at large is continually getting in more people, but by and large, it is more about these new games innovating in a way that they can draw players off of other games, other big titles. And when you're looking, you specifically mentioned League of Legends, when you're looking at a game like that, that's a really difficult game to poach players off of, because they do a very good job, as far as most game studios go, of internally innovating with each new champion. They do a good job of taking and really introducing new mechanics that manipulate, or new champions that manipulate some of the current game mechanics. So which I believe the latest one, Kindred, they had to push back because they realized something about it was actually game breaking.
Yeah, there was some bug with it that they declined to identify. But yeah, and I think that's actually a good point, because Kindred actually is something that's pretty new, at least to League of Legends, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you're doing something that's never been done in any game before. When you're a game as big as League, all that matters is that you innovate within your own space, and I think Kindred definitely does that.
Yeah, and in the chat too, they're Cloaked and Sailkite are talking about Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike as being, more of what, or sorry, Overwatch, Gigantic, these type of games that are kind of delving more into that type of arena, arena battle game like Team Fortress 2 and Counter-Strike. So, and that's another thing too. You have yet another genre probably emerging, similar to a MOBA genre, maybe not quite as unique as it's kind of pulling off some stuff, but that's what MOBA genres were too. It was RTS with a little bit of a persistence to it, in arena match. So it's just interesting. All these things are going to have to do things to pull people off of other things. So, when you start getting this, you're getting in this position where you're really just, games are pulling people from each other, because, and this is something, let me just go back for a minute, and back when games in the 80s, 90s, console games, arcade games, a large portion of these games were like single play. You play through it, you're done. Maybe you try and keep beating your high score, or competing with other people to beat a high score. But by and large, you could play a game, finish it, and move on to another game. That was just how a lot of it went. And in today's era, it almost seems like, the concept, especially with MOBAs and MMOs, is to keep people involved in that game and keep it persisting and keep, drawing people's money. And so it makes the competition really fierce for games. People aren't able to just consume a game and move on to another one. So it's, I think it's an interesting problem. And when you get that situation, you start getting into the territory of, okay, well, which game do I like more? Which games do I want to be playing? Which do I don't? And when, for people that are constantly, we're having to keep the public informed about a wide variety of games, Jeremy and myself. So we can't really necessarily just pick one game and just, love that one game and only play that. We've got to dabble into a little bit of everything, keep people up to date on the news of all these games. So for us, it's tough. We've got to kind of try and judge what games are going to do well, what games are going to stick, be worth our time. And, that's something I think, it's a little bit daunting, but it's also sometimes fun to kind of sit there and think, which games are going to sink and swim in this flood. And that's, that was kind of the theme of the show, because I wanted to get into this a little bit. So I'll go ahead and let Jeremy start, and you can talk specifically. We'll start with the MOBA genre, and maybe pick out your favorite game that you play, why you play it, and then, which I'm sure people that have watched the show probably know, but then maybe pick out some obscure games coming up that you think might have a place, might find a niche somewhere, and then maybe talk about some games you think will definitely just collapse, that are big maybe, or games that are small and are not ever going to have a chance.
All right, so yeah, as you said, anyone who's watching, probably is already aware that my number one game is League of Legends. Like, there's no secret there, and there's a million and one things that League does right. If you ask the community, there's a million and one things that they do wrong. But I mean, A, no game is perfect. But B, I think I'll kind of answer your question in a slightly more broad spectrum, just because I mean the answers might even be games I'm not necessarily aware of. But I think there's a few very important things that are going to distinguish which games are successful, which games aren't. One of the most important things, and it's something that we've talked about in the past as well, is developer involvement and openness with the community. And for all of the Riot Please posts, that go up on Reddit, Riot Games does a fantastic job of interacting with the community. Again, they're not perfect. Sometimes they don't do it quite right, but overall, they do better than most at being part of the community, not just, issuing statements, but like legitimately they're players of the games themselves. They're part of the community. They're always interacting. They're always trying to give as much transparency as they reasonably can, without compromising the integrity of the game. And that's something that's really big. People like to feel that they have a connection with the game developer for a game that they're going to be investing a lot of time in. And I think that's extremely important. And then the other aspect, too, is if a game wants to be able to market itself as an esport, they have to put a lot of effort into the esports side of things, which obviously Riot Games has done like no other company has. That I don't think is even debatable. Not to say that other companies haven't done good things. They have. It's just the level to which Riot Games has taken things has really set, I think, a new standard that other companies have to try to live up to. With that said, we do see huge events. As mentioned before, Dota's the international, just an absolutely insane prize pool. I think where some other games might see some issues, I'm gonna point at Smite as a really good example, actually, because although I don't actively play the game, I've been to the Smite World Championships. I actually went to the first ever big Smite tournament, a launch tournament, and I've actually interacted with a lot of cool people and some of the people from Hi-Res Studios who make the game, and I'm actually a fan of what they're doing. So this isn't a section to bash on Smite, but some of the things that I think they need to work on, and it's almost unfair, and I'm going to sidetrack just for a sec, but it's almost unfair because League of Legends, where it is now, is not where it started. But any game that is just starting out on the esports scene has to live up to the precedent that League of Legends has set. So while League had time to build up to where they are now, other games are now just going to be held against that standard. So it's kind of unfair for them, but it is what it is. So for Smite, their World Championships are really good. I'm just going to
cut in really quick. Yeah. That's a great point because, on the flip side too, with MMORPGs, that's what you get with this, this looming shadow of WoW. They've had the time, EverQuest and WoW obviously more graphically appealing, but they've had the time to build up. So you're not, you're building, the people coming in to build an MMO, that's why they have to have these massive budgets to even compete with WoW whatsoever and attempt to poach players off of that game. But, it's that same, for people maybe that play those types of games, that's exactly what it is in the MOBA genre. You're running into this situation where you're competing against a game that's established itself and grown over time, and any new game is expected to be at that level. So, I just wanted to jump in with that because it was a good parallel between both genres. So,
yeah, definitely. So, if you look at Smite, the World Championships were awesome, really good production quality, high prize pool, all that. But I think they're doing a little bit better now with it, but the SPL, which is their regular season, so to speak, it doesn't really compare to the LCS. The production quality isn't the same. Overall, teams are not making, players are not making the same amount of money. I actually spoke to one team manager at the Season 1 World Championships, and he was saying, he's just barely struggling, to, keep his team, fed and clothed, and they're a professional team. And there's just much less money available for them. Now, again, there's only so much that the game developer can actually do about that. But you know, it's tough because again um, for like Riot Games, they take a loss on their esports scene. Like they lose money by doing it, but it's worth it to them because they know that that it's what's going to help continue to grow the actual player base. You know, and there's peripheral ways that it makes money, but overall they operate at a loss doing it, but they're able to keep doing it, and they have, you know, excellent production quality. Um, Whereas it can be more difficult for a company that hasn't reached that level of success yet to also be willing to take just as large a financial loss to be able to do it. It's tough. So while the World Championships might be really good, before the World Championships, their players, and again, maybe it's different now, or maybe for the top teams, they do better because I spoke to, you know, the owner of a smaller team. So maybe for the top teams it's easier, but you know, in a game that doesn't have the same level of popularity, it can be harder for their esports presence to develop, but they have to try, or else in a genre where an esports presence is expected, if you're not able to have one that is thriving, it can be very difficult to find success for the long term. So I think those are the things that are really going to determine, at least in the MOBA genre, whether long-term success is feasible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It is this, you know, going up against such established games, there are a lot of expectations, you know, and it's really, I think, unique in the MOBA genre because you have this spectator element that is an expectation. You know, in other game genres, you don't really get that problem, and with you know, with any game that's in the esports genre or is of the same genre as games that are esports, they're going to have that. And it's going to be extremely tough because that is a whole different type of infrastructure. You know, that's no longer just taking transactions from players and, you know, managing servers and stuff. Now you've got to manage, you know, it goes into broadcasting, you know, and we've already seen what was it, ESPN2 or something that broadcast some of one of the Smite?
Yeah,
Smite
ESPN did Dota, I believe.
Dota, that's right.
They did like ESPN3 and then ESPN2.
Yeah, and
like the finals, I believe it was.
I'm sure that did not happen without some crazy extensive negotiating for you know, it's just a whole nother beast. And when you're talking about you know, a group of guys or maybe even a small development studio that comes up with an idea for a game, that's just not their forte, you know, and they're going to, you know, it's another additional expense which stacks on this budget, you know, that they've got to amass to become competitive or become viable in the genre. So it's an interesting thing that's going to factor into which games, you know, thrive or, you know, sink or swim, which ones live or die. So yeah, definitely a great point, and that goes the same for MMORPGs. I was watching Dave Georgeson, the former lead, basically lead creative director for all of the EverQuest franchise games for Sony Online Entertainment, when they went to Daybreak and then he was let go. But he was on a recent live stream. I was watching him, and he was talking about how he might have potential to go back into the industry in MMOs, but it's just a scary thing because the budgets that you have to have for your games to be viable are humongous now. Yeah. Like just ridiculous. And those budgets actually kind of, his big thing was, you know, the budgets actually kind of cripple some of the decision making. You know, it's tough when you've got an investor signing a multi-million-dollar check for your studio and, you know, you're going to say, well, we want to take these risks with it, you know, and bring up some innovation or some things you want to do that are totally unproven, you know, but maybe necessary to make your game stand out. And it's just not something that the people handing over the money are willing to do. So it's a very interesting situation, and definitely one I don't envy at all. I would not want to be up there making the call as the investor or as the design team on any of these big genre games. So but you know, these are things that we look at as people who are trying to cover these games and, you know, try to provide and spend our time, you know, sharing information on the most relevant titles that are going to last, that people are going to enjoy the most. It's kind of difficult to do, but anyways, so one thing you didn't answer in my huge multi-part question was which games, maybe name a specific game that is new that just is never, maybe possibly never going to have a shot, or something you've heard in development that just seems like it just doesn't have what it takes.
See, that's tough to say, because I never want to say before anything's proven that, there's no way, that something's going to work out, because games surprise you. And also, I think for the games that are too early on to make a call on whether the developers are pretty, tight-lipped about a lot of stuff anyway, so it's hard to say, because you looked at a game, and again, I'll go back to I'll go back to Dawngate, where it looked like it had all the pieces for success. It had enough of the initial formula, but with enough innovation that people were excited about it. It had people talking about it. It had a major, company, EA, working on it. Everything seemed to be in place for it to be a game that was going to launch and have some success, and then it never even got out. So I think it's pretty hard to say one way or the other. So we'll try not to. I'm gonna be a little bit more optimistic than Baby Ken and Chad, and not say all of them are going to fail. But it is hard, because also there's still the question of, is this a genre that is going to be popular for a long time to come? Because it's still, while the genre has been around for a long time, the level of popularity it's currently at has only been for a few years. So I think there's still the large question of how long it'll be around for. It seems like it could be around for a long time, but will it have that staying power? I don't know. And if it doesn't, then I guess Buchanan's right, and all of them are going to fail at some point. So I think it's just I think we still have to wait and see what the staying power of the genre even is, and how the players and spectators respond to it.
I think one of the interesting facets I was watching an episode of Extra Credits on YouTube. Great, if you're interested in game design or theory, great show to watch on YouTube, Extra Credits. But I was watching, they just posted a new video a couple days ago about future-proofing your game. And I think that, trading card games do it better than almost any game out there, but MMOs, obviously, they have that, you're invested in your character, you've spent a lot of time, you have that in there. And I think the same goes with MOBAs. They're future-proofed in the sense that you're spending a lot of time learning the strategies, learning all these champions, unlocking all of these heroes and champions or whatever, and spending time just studying the game. So I think there's a lot of, investment that gets built in. So I do believe they have quite a bit of staying power. That's something that I don't think, which is an interesting point, what Selka and Cloaked were talking about in chat, of this hybrid, FPS arena type game. I wonder if that will have as much staying power, because it's a little bit different, It's more about the skill and less about memorizing or, learning strategies and things like that. I think they're very similar, but I think it might not possess as much staying power. But again, I'm just armchairing that. But yeah, what I was thinking though, I totally went off on a tangent. Sorry, I apologize. I do that.
We've never done that before, ever.
Yes, I think everybody here knows me well for that. But anyways, for the MOBA genre, is there any games that this is something that just you don't have to be held accountable for any opinion or whatever? Is there any game that you just want to succeed just because you like what it's doing, or you think it has something that's interesting? Is there any game that you just want to do better? Maybe it's a big game, maybe it's a small obscure game in the MOBA genre.
I'm gonna go back and say Smite, because I think they might anyway, even without my great power of well-wishing. But they definitely took a risk doing something a little bit differently. Since I was a kid, always been a fan of mythology and whatnot. So even if I don't necessarily play a bunch of the game, I still like what they've done. I think their esports scene definitely needs a kick if they're going to try to compete with things like Dota and League of Legends. I think that, again, they might just be on track to do it anyway. I'm not saying like that game's about to fail or anything. I'm not saying that. But I'd definitely like to see a boost for them. As I said, I've talked to some people from Hi-Rez. I think the studio has the right attitude. They have some of the right pieces in place, but they definitely could just use a slight boost to their esports scene. And I think if they get that, and if they see more success, again, it's not that they've been failing or anything, but I think if their success continues and grows, it could be very good for the community as a whole. But I definitely like to see that happen for sure.
Nice. Well, diving into MOBAs, if I had to pick one that I would like, that I would like to see, like taking the first half of the question, like to see not do well. I want to say Heroes of the Storm. I just played it. And I have nothing against Blizzard. I really enjoyed World of Warcraft. The first year and a half I played it was awesome. Blizzard does great work. Everything's polished, but I just don't like it. It's just not my personal taste. So, and I just don't. I don't know. It just doesn't have that same type of depth, I think, that you get from a lot of the other games in the genre, even games that aren't that well polished, or games like, I remember playing Smite when it was pretty early on. It was really a rough go, but it just felt good, and I don't get that same feel from Heroes of the Storm, and I would expect, with how much polish there is on it, I should have that feeling. So, and maybe it's personal taste, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. I don't think it's going to do as well, but again, it does have, just like the EA Dawngate game, it does have everything that you would expect a company who needs a game, and the pieces you need to make this type of game work, they have. So it probably will survive because of that. I think if sorry, I've been trying to mute my mic down a little bit because of my computer. My other mic broke, but I'm loud again, so as I'm probably blowing out your ears if you've all turned up the volume. But yeah, I was just saying, Heroes of the Storm, it should be doing it for me, but it's not. And I believe it'll survive because it has everything it needs, but it should have everything it needs to just compete with League of Legends, and I just don't think it will. So that's my kind of down prediction. As far as new games that I really want to do well, I haven't been following the MOBAs as closely, so I don't know in that genre. I tell you, I'd like to see a MOBA that has to do with a sci-fi, mech warrior type theme or something like that. That would be a fun game, but yeah, other than that. So anyways, I wanted to flip this over to the MMORPG genre, because I think it's always valuable, even though, me talking about MOBAs, I have some familiarity with them, but I'm not as nearly as close to an expert as Jeremy is, and the same for him with MMORPG. So we're going to flip this over to the other side and kind of do the same thing for MMORPGs, and just to not put you on the spot totally again, I'll go ahead and start off first, but and people, Baby Cannon knows participating in some of the other shows, and Sailkite as well. There are games that are on my radar that are not out yet that I look to as the future, but as far as, it's just tough in the MMORPG genre because it's been around longer, and now that we're kind of experiencing some of that bottom fallout, it really is about the games that are choosing to innovate. And I think WoW tried to do some dramatic things with Draenor expansion that went over very badly. And I think they're going to try to flip that around with Legion in this new expansion, but we won't really know until we get a lot more details about that and see what the actual future expansion is of that. But a very trusted person that was working on EverQuest Next, Steve Denuser, Morgard, he went over to Blizzard, and he says there's very good things coming for the game as far as social gameplay and lore and stuff in World of Warcraft's future. So I do have hope there, and they definitely have the budget to fix things. So, but anyways, without just totally ranting, just talking in multiple directions, I think that any game that comes into this genre is going to struggle like other MOBAs would, coming up against games with such huge establishment. You've got to just be sound, and I think one thing that I wrote an article earlier this week that kind of was a rebuttal to one of our fellow co-staffers, David's column, talking about WoW being this problem or whatever, but I think the problem is bigger and beyond games coming into this genre and struggling against the massive might of WoW. It's not so much that as in, there are all these expectations, but I think developers need to just you know, push away the expectations, and it probably should happen with the MOBA genre as well. You know, when a game's coming into that genre, they need to probably just ignore a lot of the expectations and start considering systems or features and saying, does this really make sense for our game right now? And start small, because, you know, any game can grow big if you make your core audience happy and they attract their friends. You know, you may not get the instant success, and it's a bit longer investment, but you know, if you're not doing all those features, maybe your budget can be smaller too, and so it's a, you know, push-pull situation. But yeah, I think that games coming in, just especially MMOs, they need to pair out mechanics, you know, or you know, look at features and systems and say, hey, this doesn't really make sense for us right now. We don't even know what the lore would do in that instance. So I like the way Revival, and you know, it was ultimately going to come back to this, obviously, everybody knows. I like Revival because this is what they're doing. You know, they're saying, hey, we're going to start small and we're going to add things as they make sense for our game, and we're going to stick to what our game is about. We're going to stick to the play style we want people to feel. So, and that's what I really love. You know, and I would really love other games if they followed that same mindset. You know, maybe not the game totally different, but following this idea of, we're going to think about what we want our game to feel like, what we want it to be like, and we're going to stick to that, and we're not going to use systems, or we're not going to bolt all these things on that are just expected for a game in this genre. So, you know, that's kind of my big spiel, and I think Revival is one of those games. I think EverQuest Next was pursuing a good direction, being some really innovative, trying to establish what they wanted their game to feel like. But yeah, you know, they have a bunch of other MMOs, so they're obviously going to carry on some of these systems that people expect, but they were doing a good job there. I hope that game continues. So those are my two games that I'm still hopeful for. And then small games, you know, there aren't games, I just don't know. You know, there are games coming up, Blade and Soul, WildStar went free to play, and I think WildStar is going to be like, it's not obviously as badly managed as Lineage. Lineage, ArcAge was terribly managed, and you know, that game basically toppled really quickly. I think WildStar is much better managed from the top down, so it's going to do much better, but it already feels like it's in this situation where an MMORPG doesn't want to be. You know, you've spent a ton of money and you've got a tiny audience, so you're not really making your money back. So I don't see WildStar surviving well, although their free-to-play cash shop was the best that I've seen. So, I mean, definitely check out details about their free-to-play cash system if you haven't, because they have a really smart way that if people want to pursue free-to-play, build a game, you know, around your free-to-play model. And I think that was thought of early on in WildStar's development, because they obviously have some great things that looked like they fit the game from the beginning. So, but anyways, enough ranting from me. I'll pass it over to Jeremy. Obviously not a genre that you've had as much experience in, but what games stand out to you? Maybe why, and what games do you think of? What games, like, maybe even talk about a game that would get you into an MMO?
Well, in my expert well, see, I have this one guy who I've heard talk about Revival a lot, so like that seems pretty cool. Don't remember who it is offhand, but I'm sure I've heard somebody talk a whole bunch about Revival. I'll let you know who it is if I think of it. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. As you said, like I try to kind of pay attention a bit, you know, to the genre and what's going on. But you know, no, I don't spend much time playing MMOs. I will say that in years past, when I used to actually play some single-player games, I've always been a huge Final Fantasy fan, just in general. So, you know, as far as what I'd like to see succeed, you know, as far as MMOs go, you know, FF14 would be one of them, just for having the Final Fantasy brand on it. And from everything I've heard, once they redid it as a Realm Reborn, it's actually quite good. So, you know, again, I haven't really played it, but I've heard it's quite good, so hooray for that. Other than that, though, like, what I would want to see, so I'll talk more in general terms, because again, I'm not going to be able to speak intelligently as far as, you know, specifics of, you know, a bunch of different MMOs. But for me, it's I guess freedom to kind of create the character that I want to create with enough structure in the world around it that I don't feel like I'm just playing life the game, you know. So enough freedom that I feel like I have a character that's individual enough to me that I can identify with and feel strongly about, but enough work done on the side of the developer to have a world that has enough freedom, but at the same time enough constraint. You know what I mean? So that, you know, I'm not just wandering aimlessly for like days at a time doing nothing, but at the same time the world should feel dynamic enough that there's always something that can be done.
So kind of in basically in between that sandbox and linear, in between those extremes, just something that is going to allow you to do things, but also make you feel like you have a purpose, or make you feel like you've got a direction to go in, and not make you do all the work.
Right, exactly.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people even that play MMOs regularly that feel that way. I definitely lean more towards the sandbox, but I do want, you know, my character to have a purpose and an impact, so and have a story that matters in the grand scheme of things, which is something that you see trying to be done in the linear style MMOs. You know, they try to make every person the center of the universe, which is probably the worst way to do it, but they're trying somehow. But yeah, anyways, I think a lot of people feel that way about trying to be in the middle somewhere. So, but now we've got all the hard questions out of our way. That was one thing I really wanted to hit, was really kind of examining these genres and making, you know, maybe making a few bold statements, but really, you know, making some hard statements about these things in the future and what the possibilities can be, because it is inevitable that, you know, many of these games will fail, and some of them that we don't expect to succeed will succeed. So hopefully, you know, we've helped populate your minds with ideas and things to help you maybe predict what games you want to get into and invest your time in, because it always sucks to get into a game and invest a lot of time and then it just goes away, whether it's an MMO or a MOBA. You know, MOBAs there haven't been as many of, obviously, but it does suck to spend so much time in something and then it goes away. So wise choice making, and of course play what you think is fun, support the games you like. So that was kind of like the main thing. While we're kind of going through our last little bit here, you guys in chat, go ahead and throw any type of questions you have at us on these topics while we're kind of going over this last one, and we'll get to answer some of you guys' questions. I want to try to get more of a Q&A in at the end of all these shows, because we're starting to see a lot of you guys come back and hang out with us, which is awesome. We totally appreciate it, and we want to make you guys more a part of the show. So, yeah, go ahead and send us questions, drop questions in chat, and we'll catch them. And anyways, the last little topic I had here for us to broach is kind of this, you know, this whole talk of the, you know, the flood of games and all that stuff. The indie boom is kind of a big part of this too. You know, people are getting access to development tools and making these fun little games. They're all over Steam. You know, you see these little $2, $3, $5 games on Steam that are really well, you know, they're solid little games because they're made by a tight team on the same page, or even just a single person that knows what they want to do with it, and they're really good little games. So I wanted to kind of talk about this and what it can mean for the big developers, because games that are, you know, out there, the big games that are not, you know, that have this huge, like kind of what I talked about earlier, they have this huge budget, it kind of cripples their ability to innovate in a lot of ways. They're never going to be able to compete with an indie game on the type of unique innovation and divergent thinking I think that you can get with an indie, because you don't have, you're not accountable to anybody really but yourself with an indie game, or maybe a small group of friends that have come to an agreement. So I kind of want to project what that means for the bigger, for the bigger industry, and talk a little bit about crowdfunding, because, and that's obviously a topic can be discussed all on its own, but I think these tie together because. And it was brought up to me when I was talking with some friends from Theory Forge about, we were just talking in our chat about, you know, crowdfunding and debating about whether Kickstarter is good for games or not. You know, like a game, like whether it's a MOBA or an MMORPG, if you try and kickstart it, even if you raise $2-3 million, that is a fraction, a tenth of what the game is going to cost to make. And is it good? Is it a good move to make? You know, having to be accountable to all those backers early on and what they want, or having to fulfill things that may not be able to be fulfilled that early on. You don't really know. So, but anyways, the whole point of that is, sorry, tangents again. I'm on like a roll with tangents today. Sorry.
You got this.
But these investors are starting to push some of the, and maybe people haven't noticed it yet, but if you notice how there's way more Kickstarters than you realize, there's way more crowdfundings, the Star Citizens of you know, the gaming universe, there's all these things. Investors are pushing the risk onto the players for innovation. You know, games are not being invested on that are not going to be able to compete with WoWs and League of Legends is in the world, and yet, you know, you need a big budget to compete in those. So what they're doing is they're starting to test the players, you know, risk evaluate first, doing these Kickstarters to see if there's enough people interested that they want to invest in a riskier, you know, more innovative project like we've seen from some of the Star Citizens, extremely ambitious. Revival has not done a Kickstarter. They're pretty ambitious, but you know, they've done their own. Landmark was extremely ambitious. They did their own founders program. And it's just becoming more regular. You see, it's like every other game these days is an early access game on Steam that's trying to draw in some early funding. Maybe, you know, what we don't see behind the scenes is, are they doing that because they're trying to open up the eyes of investors to getting big money in to help support their goal and their dream? So it's something that I'm noticing. I'm definitely taking note of, and I'm kind of curious how everybody in chat feels, and you know, how other gamers feel about the risk of these big expensive projects and innovation going more onto the players than the investors. Obviously, you know, we're still paying only a small fraction, but should we be taking that risk on an unfinished product before? Should we be the investors in these games? Is it our responsibility? Is it something that we want to do, and how many people feel comfortable about it? Because I do see an argument on both sides of being like, hey, these are our games, we're going to play them. If you really like an idea, there's nothing wrong with backing, investing, and taking a risk when you very may well get nothing out of it and you have no right to refund, which is a part of it too. You know, people can't expect refunds if they're taking an investor risk. So, but anyways, I'll go ahead and pass to you, Jeremy, that huge monstrous rant topic that I just said. But I mean, what are your thoughts on?
I'm happy to tackle that in like the last 2 minutes that we have. No problem. Thank you for affording me so much time on such a simple topic.
You're welcome.
I think really what it comes down to is almost view it as a trade-off, because in the traditional sense of investing, the investors are putting in a lot of money and have a lot of control. Hey, we got our first like spam bot ever in chat. That's exciting.
Nice.
All right, this is a milestone for us.
All right,
first spam bot chat ever. So you know, the investors put in big money and have a lot of control. The trade-off for doing it this way is you get to be an investor for only a small amount of money. It could be, you know, $5 even, but you have pretty much, you know, little to no control. You're kind of at the mercy of what the creators eventually do, which sometimes is fine and sometimes can be very disappointing. And it is the risk that you take by only investing for a few dollars, or, you know, some people obviously do large amounts, but even then, you know, even if you invest $1,000, which is a lot of money, you know, to put into a Kickstarter, it's still nowhere near what, you know, some big investor would have put, you know, into a game on their own. So I think it's really just that trade-off. Is it good or bad is very debatable, and certainly something that we don't have time to do right now, but I think that's really what it comes down to. Big investor, big amount of control. Tiny investor, tiny amount of control. And that's really what it comes down to. So I think when you do that, you just kind of accept that there is a risk when you know, invest in a Kickstarter, that maybe it never happens, or you don't get the product you thought you were going to get, but you lose a lot less money than, you know, a big time investor would if the product they invested in failed. So I think it's just a trade-off, and you just kind of accept that risk.
See, I gave you so little time because I was so confident in your skill of brevity. You just basically just chimed in right there with exactly a great little comment. So yeah, I like your explanation. You know, it is a fair trade, and you know, for players that, you know, sticking to our theme here of a crowded market, you know, games sinking or swimming, you know, in these games where you get to be an investor voice, you know, one of the tiny thousands chanting and helping support, you do get to help whether these games sink or swim, which I think in the past was not something that people had as much direct control over. Whereas now, you know, it's slightly more democratic in the instance that if a game chooses to kickstart itself, and if there's enough people that say, yeah, I would do this, you know, and they do their backing, and that opens up the eyes of an investor, you know, that one person or the many one persons gave their voice, and this game is going to succeed where maybe it otherwise would not have. So I do think it's a good thing. It just it's one of those things that needs to be made very clear, I think, to people that are participating in this, because I think there are a lot, because it's a new, you know, the times they are changing, you know, and I don't think a lot of gamers, especially young gamers, you know, that are not as, you know, seasoned in the world with having to deal with bills and responsibilities and money things and stuff. Yeah, all the monies. But, you know, when you're not thinking about those things, it's hard to understand some of the decision making that goes on with some of these early access things, and why developers choose to do certain things, or, you know, the order of things. So it's something that I think they need to do a better job of being clear about. But yeah, I do think it's a good thing, and Jeremy, you really said it best. You know, it really is a trade-off of how you're trading some amount of huge investment, you know, for little for getting a voice, you know, getting a little say in, and having some of that power, rather than people who have no idea about what gaming is about, possibly. So yeah, and that's I mean, I'm not going to just keep running it on here. I think that's a good spot to kind of end in the show on. We're right at our mark here anyways. I was kind of scrolling up while Jeremy was talking really quick through the chat to see for any questions, but apparently we've answered all your questions, so
we're just that efficient.
But yeah, thanks you guys for coming again. Obviously, you know, if you like us, support us if you can. If not, come in chat and join us. You make the show better by being here. So bring questions other than is it prawn? Because we can't answer that one, because I'm definitely not clicking that.
I'm not clicking that link. You guys, if someone wants the answer to that, you let us all know.
Yeah, so I am not answering that. But again, thank you guys. Of course, we are 10-Ton Hammer. You know, we are two pieces of the pie there. So go check it out. You know, our written content is really good. Like, don't pretend like it's what I'm talking about that's not good here. It's better than what I say. My words work better on when I can read and edit them. So yeah, no, but good stuff. You guys check it out. We've got, you know, we cover MOBAs. Jeremy's covering all the, you know, all the tournaments and all the top stuff to keep you competitive in the MOBA genre and other competitive gaming. And, you know, I'm tinkering and looking at all the game design and upcoming MMOs. So read our stuff, check it out. And as far as upcoming content for me, I'm kind of just winging it a little bit. You know, I'm trying to find some games to stick to right now. So I'm going to be looking into Armored Warfare, which is a little bit of a strategy game, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of WildStar and looking at Star Wars: The Old Republic, the new expansion, because they have some interesting things with level sync that I'm liking, because it's kind of going to make it more sandboxy and like the original EverQuest. So, and that's a great IP. And Star Wars Episode 7 is coming out, so, you know, it's going to happen. So, alright you guys, enough ranting by me. Thanks. Jeremy, do you have anything else that you wanted to share, say, remind people of that I probably didn't, maybe like when we do this thing? And
that they should probably come back every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to watch our videos, and if they miss them, they can always find it on the 10-Ton Hammer YouTube page or on 10tonhammer.com itself whenever Alex actually gets around to posting them.
Yes, which I just did 3 of them last night, so we're all up to date after,
there we go.
Except for this one, which I will do as soon as we get done, I promise. So it is literally going to happen. But thanks you guys. That is it. Have a good weekend, and we will see you guys next week. Ta-ta.
Thanks guys for hanging out.